Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching us from today. Welcome to Shifting from Grudge to Grit, Grace, and Gratitude. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Suzanne Sammon. And we were just discussing her second name, which is in French, LaVoie, and in the States, LaVoie, it would be mentioned, right? So interesting how just the pronunciation can shift from one country to another. Those that are joining us on Instagram and YouTube, please don't hesitate to send us a comment. Not all comments filter through to StreamYard, the platform that we stream from, but we will endeavor to at least acknowledge your comments or respond where possible. We are going to be missed by my co-host, Jamila, who unfortunately has just met with an incident of crime and she's needing to resolve that. She is okay, just a bit shaken up, but she'll join us again next week. So let me just give a short bio on Suzanne and we will then dive right in. Suzanne is filled with a huge zest for life. She has served in multiple diverse industries, but her passion are for hospitality, tourism, and customer service. Suzanne began her author journey in 2016 with solo and compilation books. Additional literary achievements include being a guest blogger for multiple digital magazines and websites. Suzanne serves in both traditional and freelance sectors, including serving as an international editor, proofreader, and ghostwriter. She has been a public speaker at various venues, both in person and online, and holds an advanced degree in international and community development. Suzanne has a love for helping customers or guests have epic experiences. I want to know more about these epic experiences, especially through communication, promotion, and attention to individual needs and preferences. Suzanne's level of expertise derives from a professional journey of over 30 years of customer service related position. She believes everyone can be their own individual tour guides. That's interesting. I love that. Which enables them to navigate their own unique journeys towards, here's the word again, epic destinations. So our theme for today is really around defying the odds, a journey from autoimmune diagnosis to victory. We will dive into the challenges, resilience, and transformative insights gained along the way. So without further ado, welcome, Suzanne. Looking forward to our conversation today. And as I said to you, not rehearsed, we start wherever you want to start today on this hero's journey that you have probably done many times over. What would you like to start with today?
I think I'd like to start where my journey really had started when I had a bad car accident in the year 2000, and that ultimately led to this journey I'm going to be speaking about today with my autoimmune. So I'd like to start with, a lot of times we talk about invisible illnesses and invisible conditions, and I'd like to dive more into that, to give a bit of like what my experience was.
Absolutely. So it's all yours. We are all ears, in waiting in anticipation to hear your story.
So in the year 2000, I was living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At the time, I was working with the Red Cross, and I was coming home. I was driving a coworker home with me, and it was just regular night. We had done a fire prevention night, and on the way home, and I remember the time exactly, it was 10:46 at night, going through a regular intersection. The light was green on my end, and as I'm going through, the next thing I heard was my coworker screaming. I looked and I saw this giant grill from a vehicle, and the next was just utter chaos. And I remember the smells, I remember the sounds, and I got hit by a very huge SUV that ran a red light. In fact, it was so powerful, the hit, that I went flying across the intersection to the other side, and there were multiple witnesses that came to our aid. What happened was, though, the residuals, even though I was wearing my seatbelt, the impact was so heavy. And back then I used to drive close to the airbag. I got shoved against the car door on my end, and I wound up with a traumatic brain injury, broken bones, nerve damage. And to this day, I still have challenges with that, but I have navigated a lot. And then one of the other challenges that I had as a residual was this autoimmune trauma. Physical trauma to the body can bring a lot of inner residual damage that we're not even aware of until years later. And what I wanted to say about invisible conditions, like, it's so easy. Like, if I had a cast on my arm, or like in the accident, I had a broken thumb, so I had a cast on that. You can see that. But with my brain injury, you can't see that. You couldn't see the nerve damage. You couldn't see the pain and excruciating pain that I was in. So it's hard to, like, I would tell people that I was in a lot of pain, or I couldn't do this or that activity. And I can't tell you how many times I was told that, oh, you're just not trying hard enough, or you're not working hard enough, or you're just lazy, or whatever. And it was really challenging. And then it ultimately led to, again, this autoimmune condition that was so advanced because I kept trying for years to go to doctors and say, I'm struggling with this, something is wrong. And they're like, oh, you got to lose weight. Oh, you're, in your 40s, you're going through menopause. Oh, this, oh, that. And I just wasn't being heard. And it wasn't until I went to a hematologist who said my inflammation levels were off the charts. She had never seen anything like it before. And that ultimately led to the diagnosis. And by that time, I was diagnosed. When I went to a rheumatologist, I was actually near my major organ shutting down and not being able to walk.
Wow. And what was the diagnosis? What type of autoimmune, if you may ask?
I was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis, which my rheumatologist said is one of the most challenging and roughest and toughest of the arthritis, because it gets so down deep, and it acts like a cancer, because it literally was spreading throughout my entire body. It affected more than 5 of my major joints. And he said it was actually getting ready to affect my organs. And he said, if you hadn't come now, I most likely would have ended up in a wheelchair. It also affected my tendons. It affected everything that, I had to leave my one job that I was working at because I couldn't stand on my feet. The pain was something that I just had never experienced before, even after the accident. But again, I couldn't get people to understand like what was going on inside of me. And I feel for people that have autoimmune conditions like fibromyalgia and multiple sclerosis and different types of arthritis, because we're often judged, and it's really challenging. It's really challenging to live a life with an invisible condition.
Suzanne, this is quite a heroic experience in and of itself, because the accident was already traumatic, so having to deal with that and not being heard or understood and being judged in that is even harder, because it's a time when you're feeling so isolated and so overwhelmed, and the emotional state is even elevated at that point in time. You're already having to heal through the trauma of the accident, and having experienced that trauma, which still lingered because it would have taken time to go into a recovery state. Then discovering the autoimmune. So I just want to clarify: did I hear you correct that the accident is then the catalyst for you to have discovered that you had the silent autoimmune disease?
Yes, it exacerbated it.
Yeah.
Yes, my
Go ahead. No
rheumatologist
problem.
said that he's seen this before, that a traumatic event like an accident, if something is dormant inside of me, because there's a history of arthritis in my family, he believes that it's been building up for 24 years.
And so, how do we, it's very difficult when we are in this traumatic experience, having to find the gifts and opportunities within that. Because in that moment, you feel like, why is this happening to me? What have I done to deserve this? Why me? There's so many unanswered questions and uncertainties and fears that one goes through just in and of itself. And now you have to now figure out, hey, but I actually had something dormant in me. And so, whilst it is a gift, in that very moment, you don't see it as a gift. When did that time come for you when you were in a space of no longer being in what we call the segment, where you shifted out of that grudge, resentful state, and then having to have had grit to overcome all these different experiences and having that radical resilience around all the people that heard or understood or even acknowledged what you were going through? How do you then move forward into that space of honoring yourself with grace and being in a space of gratitude for the adversity, as Ronald says so nicely? Welcome, Ronald. He's also a regular from the US. How do you then embrace this difficult, dark night of the soul experience in the hero's journey, as it's called, and then find the insight and the wisdom to move forward? Are you able to share an actual practical time when that happened for you?
Yes, I can. It's actually twofold, but I'll start with the time before I was diagnosed with the autoimmune. So I had been used to working in the traditional sector, and after the accident, I struggled very deeply in the jobs that I was doing. I was working in education and mental health. I didn't understand at the time that the residuals from the brain injury were causing me to have difficulties, like with overstimulation, being around a lot of crowds, noise, lights, a lot of things that I just would struggle with. And it was in those situations that I was met with a lot of judgment and misunderstanding. And then around 2016, I had been working at a position that I really liked. I was working in hospitality, but then I had another condition that crept up on me, and whether we're not sure if it came from the accident, but I was literally homebound. I had to stay at home because I had to be near a bathroom. And it was at this time in my life, I'm like, all right, because I'm very spiritual. I'm like, all right, God, I don't understand this. Like, I don't know what to do at this point. Now, one thing I want to mention is when I was a little kid, I was diagnosed with childhood asthma, and it was 3 years old. I almost died from that. And I often spent a lot of time in hospitals, and I was in what they called an oxygen tent. And a lot of people aren't aware of those. This was in the 70s. And it was the only way that I could get help. And I couldn't even watch TV because back then they thought that the sparks from the old TVs that we had would do something with the tent. So I was always like, I don't want to go kaboom here, and so I got very used to solitude, entertaining myself. I mean, my family was allowed to visit, but I still was in isolation a lot. And I got into reading. And I also, when I was home a lot from school because of this asthma. So I started writing. And I started writing about how I wanted my life to be. And writing became a very therapeutic modality for me. And then, so around this time of around 2016, I just felt a huge spiritual download of, you've got to get back into writing. You've always wanted to write a book. Let's start working on that. So I had to learn to be open And it's not easy. It has taken me many, many, many years to do this, but it's a mindset shift of letting go of what you thought your life was going to be. And I had a lot of plans. I had a lot of visions about how I wanted my life to be, but that was before the brain injury. That was before the autoimmune and everything else that transpired. And I will mention that I went through a period of time, and it was around the pandemic time, where I lost my ability to read and write for a little bit, and it was scary. I didn't know if it was going to come back, but it has, thank God. But prior to that, I was on my social media, and I just happened to come across, and it's not a coincidence, I believe it was divinely orchestrated, that there was a post that somebody was looking for public or people that wanted to get published in a compilation book. And it was about a theme that was very dear to my heart. I reached out to this lady. We had a great conversation, and she invited me to be part of this compilation. And it was published in December of 2016. And then that led to me meeting my publisher in Canada. And then I wound up writing my first solo book with her. And then that went on to meeting another compilation book, and then another publisher. So altogether, I have 3 compilation books and 1 solo book, and then I have more that are going to be coming out. But what happened was, it started shifting for me at that time that I had to be open. I had to be open to a different way of life, because the more that I kept resisting, and there's an old saying about what you resist persists. And I just kept saying, like, no, I want to go back to my old life, my old ways of doing things. And it just, I had to accept that it's like the grieving process. I mean, when you have a traumatic injury like I did, there's a grieving process with it. And I felt everything. I mean, there was anger, there was sadness, there was bargaining, there was everything. And I actually got to the full acceptance stage this year, but it took me a long time. And even with everything that was transpiring for me with the writing and editing and everything, it really didn't hit me until like this year, dealing with the autoimmune, that I was like, okay, my life, even though it's not what I planned it to be, it actually has turned out to be even better than I have imagined, because I have things that have come about in my life that I don't believe would have happened if I hadn't been open, if I hadn't had that space of literally having so much stripped away from me. And then I could clearly see that I was meant to go into writing, and then it led to editing, and I have just had this amazing life coming through. But it took this mindset shift. And every single day, even to this day, I listen to affirmations, I listen to meditations, and I have to keep telling myself that I'm grateful for who I am today and what is to come. I had to learn to love myself again. I hated myself when I had the brain injury. I'm like, this is not, I had a near perfect memory, and that got severely compromised from the accident. So I really had to learn how to do that. And it took a long, long time to accept that even though my brain struggles in some ways, my creative part of my brain just skyrocketed. And that has really helped me through.
You know, Suzanne, there's so much resonance in what you are discussing. But the first thing I want to just say to you is a huge monumental acknowledgement to live from this place of non-attachment. And I figure that this was your early training ground, having been diagnosed with asthma and having to be in these hospitals several times and finding solace there, because in those moments of being alone, being isolated, you already discovered these beautiful gifts of writing and reading, which you didn't know at the time were catalyzers for later on in your life to reconnect with And those were the gifts of having this condition of asthma. And
Yes.
so the training ground was very early on
Mm-hmm.
for not only equipping you to be radically resilient, but also to craft a love for something that was going to be your healing. And
Yeah.
I'm very sure now you serving others to leverage that sort of mediums as a form or a modality to also, help accelerate their own healing. So how profound is this hero's journey? Because what you chose to do in both that former years of the asthma and eventually the accident and then the autoimmune and losing work, there's a lot of grief in that.
Yes.
And in the hero's journey, it's very difficult to step into the unknown and to accept that quest. And what you so boldly and courageously did was you accepted the call, you heeded that call, no matter how difficult or uncertain or frightening it was, you let go
Mm.
and you surrendered. So I want to ask you, where did that strength, because I love what you said earlier on, I'm spiritual, very different to I'm religious. Because
Yeah.
religion is symbolic and, you do certain practices and it symbolizes the parts of the faith. But when we are spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
we lead with empathy, compassion, grace,
Yes.
love, and kindness and humility. And I think that's also been holding you in good stead. But in this journey, we always feel isolated. You're
Yeah.
saying that you didn't necessarily not appreciate the solace. Who was by your side other than your creator? Because I know you called on your creator a few times from what you've shared. But who
Mm-hmm.
else was in this path or on this journey with you and that you still are immensely grateful for today and have a good relationship with?
I mean, definitely my mom was always there, a huge supporter. And then also I had been blessed with so many amazing friends. And, and also too, a lot of the authors that I had become friends with when I was doing editing and my publisher. And I just was so blessed with the fact that there were people that they listened to me. Like they when I really sat down and being the gift of a storyteller, I was able to really explain it to where they understood and everything. And when you're mentioning about religion and spirituality, it made me think about something I read one time. It said that religion was for people who were trying to stay out of hell, and then spirituality is for those who have been through it already and then have learned. And it's
It's
true. I mean, I
very true.
often yeah, I've been through so many portals of hell, but I mean, they all. It, the best way I can explain it is each traumatic challenge I went through took something from me, but then it added something as well.
Mm, mm,
And I feel that, and also too, one thing that has really helped me is that I travel, I love tourism, and I love having experiences. And that has been like a friend to me and has been healing for me. And it just helps me get out there and understand that, I mean, sometimes we can feel alone, but really there are a lot of people out there that
mm,
are looking for that voice to say, hey, I get you and everything. And I'm grateful that since everything has happened, that I've had these opportunities to be able to have even bigger experiences. I'll share one with you here with my editing. There was a gentleman in 2018 who I edited his book, and he was very, very influential, and his book actually ended up in the Queen's Library at Buckingham Palace. And I
wow.
got a letter well, it was sent to me, but it was actually from the Queen's personal assistant. I think she was called the Lady in Waiting or something. And it said, "Thank you very much. This is in the library of Buckingham Palace." I mean, my name was in that book as the editor. And I'm just like, I was so blown away. I mean, that's one of those epic experiences. I mean, who can say that, hey, one of my books I edited is in Buckingham Palace? So
That's phenomenal, right? And again, you were able to transmute pain, transcend it into purpose, and leverage it to such an extent that it became it's almost in light. It's like you say, it's an epic experience. It was like an adventure that they took you to. And here in the Queen's Library, I mean, very few people can say that. So kudos to you.
Yeah, like try to beat that credential. It's so funny. I mean,
oh my gosh, I just love it. I mean, gosh, it is a huge accolade. And I mean, I like you, I have a love for reading. And I love the library. I've also done 2 compilation books so far, and I'm busy with a memoir for the last 2 years that I'm just not getting out. But bottom line is that it is so therapeutic. And our stories are not ours. I've said that on this segment many times before. Our stories are meant to be shared, not to go to the grave with us. And those, as you say, dark night of the soul experiences, it's like hell on earth, is exactly why we are chosen. And I'm certainly not implying those that haven't gone through traumatic experiences are not chosen. But I think that we are here for that purpose, to give others hope and to let them see that not every tragedy or adversity needs to stay there. It's up to us to say, what do we do with it? Yes. Now, the next question, and I mean, I'm sure you can pick up that I'm using the arc or storyline of the hero's journey, right? So you're not alone, you have mentors, guides, and we've covered that part. And so we are asked to face these dark trials and the darkness within ourselves. I call it the inner villain. In fact, my TEDx talk was around embracing the inner villain as a path to transformation. Now, what were those inner villain moments that you needed to face, where you're no longer projecting to the outside world, it's the whole world against me, and why did this happen to me, where you finally realize that you had some of your own things to deal with, because we all do. And the hero's journey is never linear. It's a repeat cycle that we're constantly going to need to be willing and open. I'm going to use your words, open, to accept that call to. So what were your demons, villains, monsters, gremlins, or whatever you want to label it as, that you had to face?
I had to deal with a lot of anger and resentment and wondering, like, why me? Why did this happen to me? Struggling with, I spent so much of my life helping people, working in professions that helped people. And I just did not understand why I had to go through so much heartache and hardship. And it seemed like I had just gotten through one crisis and then another one was just waiting in the wings to come out. And then also too, the biggest one I had to combat was I didn't like myself. I didn't like this new version of myself. Even though I had all these other wonderful things happening, there was something still deep down inside of me that didn't accept this reinvented version of myself. And that was the thing too. I was like, I have to keep reinventing myself. It's like, I love this term, life quake, like an earthquake. It's like, oh God, another life quake. I have to rebuild and I have to rebuild and I have to rebuild. And so I worked with a therapist. I started working with a therapist at the end of 2022. And she really has helped me tremendously with about loving myself and accepting myself and knowing that even though there are things about me that will never be the same, that the parts of me that were still there were actually meant to come out even higher, like with my creativeness and also too, like I'm not a fast-paced person. I'm a slower paced person. I'm an introvert, and I realized that that is okay, and that has actually helped me with my writing because I can be totally extroverted in my writing. I can be who I want to be when I'm writing books and when I'm writing blogs, and I'm starting or I'm revamping my travel blogging, and I'm able to do videos like this. And it's like it's given me so much more fortitude and courage to do these different things out there to be able to help spread a message of hope. And I've been following the chat throughout this podcast, and I'm so grateful for the support out there. And that's what this is what I love to do, is to help inspire people, because I mean, what's going on worldly and globally, I mean, people are challenged every single day, and the pandemic alone, I mean, just threw so many lives into chaos. And so I want to keep spreading the message that even when we lose, we still gain in the end, and we often gain even more than we had before. And I mean, I think about these experiences and adventures that I've had, and I don't believe I would have had them if I didn't go through the accident, and if I didn't have the autoimmune and the other conditions that I had, because it literally forced me to look at myself and be open to a new way of life. And I realize now that reinvention isn't a bad thing. I don't have to be afraid of it, because we can reinvent ourselves every day. Like I mentioned in the bio about being our own inner tour guide. And we're always there's always some new path out there, and we can take any path that we want. There's freedom in that. We don't have to relegate ourselves to one calling. I consider myself a multi-passionate entrepreneur, a multi-passionate individual. And I realized that was another thing I struggled with. I felt like I had to have like one calling or maybe one or two callings. Well, I have different callings. There's many things I feel called to. And that's something that I never would have felt if I hadn't experienced everything that I've been through.
What I am hearing is that you needed to embrace the darker parts of yourself, the parts that you shamed before, the parts that you were the judge, jury, and executioner of.
Yes.
As much as you had the outside world having their own lens of judgment towards you, it was that inner critic, that inner protagonist that you had to actually face and embrace it and integrate yourself alongside with it, because only then wisdom and insight was born. I always say the KPI for our life is the knowledge that we gain through whatever these traumatic experiences are, whether it is having a wounded upbringing, whether it is going through an accident or going through insurmountable grief, whether it is imposter syndrome, whatever the inner protagonist is, if you can face it and not reject it, that is the time that leads you to transcendence of the higher version of yourself, because it is that point in time where you talk about this reinvention. And the reinvention is actually, to me, I feel it's a claiming of your sovereignty. It's a reclaiming a part of yourself that was your essence in your former years that was lost along the way. Yes. And that these experiences leads us to these multifaceted passions or purposes. And I'm an entrepreneur, but somebody asks me what you do, and I'll say, well, I'm passionate about unlocking people's potential. I'm passionate about cultivating self-leadership. I'm passionate about writing. I'm passionate about cooking. And all of that can be business, right? It can be translated into a business. Yes. At the same time, it is the gift of being able to say, I'm facing it. I'm going to jump into this unknown, into the abyss of not knowing. But it is difficult, Suzanne, and you and I both know, having faced many multiple hero's journey experiences, whether it is being made redundant at work, that is that is a hero's journey experience. So for those that are here, Saud, thank you for joining us on Instagram. And for those that are here on LinkedIn and YouTube, thank you for your contribution. I mean, I do want to read some of Ronald's comments afterwards. But what I want to say is that this journey is about whatever, whether it is an identity you're grieving, what you thought you were going to be, whether it is a divorce that you've had to go through. These are all loss of an identity, but it's a rebirth, right? It's a rebirth of something new, something more purposefully aligned, something more divinely orchestrated is the words that I use often, Suzanne. So you can see we're very much on the same vibrational energy and resonance, because it is something I say, whether it is a storm that you're facing and you're facing that storm and you feel you're alone, that is a catalyst to the higher, more authentic version that you're meant to come back to. And I say come back to, Suzanne, because often those are the parts that we have forgotten, rejected, and let go of for whatever those reasons might be. So now you're in this abyss. Let's quickly read Ronald's comment. He says, what is this gift of adversity? And that was in our earlier conversation. He also said, such inspiration, letting go. And he says, what great accomplishment through the pain of writing. And lastly, Suzanne, you are such an inspiration, both of you. Thank you, Ronald. Ronald has always been our resident cheerleader. He's very wise and has walked many journeys, and we stay in touch, even though he's in the States. We've known each other for just on 4 years. We met through COVID, and I'm always grateful for his wisdom when he joins us. But I want to move direction here. We're into this abyss right now. You know, you are kind of slaying these dragons and demons on the outside world as well as in the inside world. What brought you back, Suzanne, other than writing and the mentors or guides or the spiritual leaders, God, source, your main source of inspiration? What else was maybe the one thing that you can say that allowed you to fight a good fight?
Definitely meditation. It was something that I had dabbled in for a couple of years, and I started really getting into it. I followed meditation videos on YouTube, and I did a lot that focused on healing, a lot that focused on loving myself and creativeness. And I mean, it's amazing. You can find a meditation on almost anything, but I really focused on healing. And it wasn't just physical healing. It was healing within myself and healing a lot of, again, the inner resentments, the inner feelings that I was struggling with, those dark times and dark moments and just dark portals that I had gone into. And meditation, like I would follow the guided ones and just having that soothing voice talk to me. I did a lot of them in the evening because it would help me sleep and because it would relax me. And then I started doing affirmation work. My therapist had recommended that to me, and listening to affirmations, and not just listening to them, but speaking them out loud. She always said there's a power that happens when you speak something out loud and staying in the present. That was another dragon I had to slay. I lived in the future. I mean, yes, there were things from the past, but I was always about the what ifs. I mean, and it was just, I was always planning out the worst case scenario so I could be prepared for whatever. And then I realized, you know what, you can't plan for there is no way to plan for every worst case scenario. And then one of the meditations reversed it and said, well, what if your what ifs became, what if the best thing happened to you? What if this was the best decision you ever made? And so it was, again, a mindset shift of, instead of the worst case, what about the best case scenario?
Yes.
And it takes, I mean, the brain is wired to protect us. The brain is always in that protect mode. But I've always heard that you can retrain it. And my brain just wants to be like, yeah, but this might happen or that. And I'm like, no, I am believing for this. So I fight with my own brain. I mean, it's like I have to tell myself that I'm going to think, but like positive about this. And I mean, one thing that I started doing recently is looking at what is right in my life. I'm going through a deep personal situation right now regarding my mom and her health. And I just keep looking at what is right in my life, even though I'm going through this path, with her and everything. And it really does help. It really does help, because it's not that I'm not acknowledging that something is stressful, but it's helping me keep anchored and grounded and centered on. We often lose sight, and I'm speaking from my own experience, that when you're going through a huge crisis, like everything is like becomes like this is a problem and everything. And it's funny too, because I can deal with the big stuff. It's those little things that get to me. Like if somebody looks at me funny, or if somebody doesn't hold the door open and lets it slam, it's like, then I could blow up over the little things. So but the big stuff, hey, I can handle the big stuff. It's those little things that kept me going. But I mean, meditation has helped with that, and again, staying in the present and not worrying so much about the future. Somebody shared one time with me, when you're living in the past or living in the future, you're trying to live in two time periods that don't exist. The past is done and the future hasn't happened yet. All you have is the 24 hours in front of you. And that has really helped me, because I don't know what is going to happen in the future. I don't, but I want to believe that there's a lot more good that's going to happen. And I just have to be open to it. And now I'm finding that there is more good to be seen and to be grateful for. But it's that constant mindset shift every single day. It really is.
No, I concur with you on that. I mean, I'm also going through a personal transitionary phase in my life, and normally I would be, what is the solution? Let me just find the solution. But this week I'm going to call it what it is. I was a pity party for myself. I stayed with the emotions because I needed to stay with the dark emotion, because if we don't sit in the darkness, we can't get into the light. It's like I always use the metaphor of the lotus flower, who can only flourish in the mud. So we have to sit in the dirt to actually feel through the pain and emotions. But again, societal norms tells us we shouldn't. We should actually move on and move forward. And so I don't allow that any longer from now. Like, I've made a conscious decision to say, I'm going to sit in the dirt. I'm going to get down, outright, ugly, dirty, messy, crazy, and feel sorry for myself in the moments if I need to. But I'm going to be in allowance of witnessing the emotions, because it's only when you're in that abyss, when you're in this darkness, when you're in the stillness of it all, when insight leaps forward.
That's true.
Otherwise, we find vices and we distract ourselves and we go back into the noise of it all, and we find things to replace the pain and the trauma and the wounds, right? And I feel that, coming back to your past and present sense, the past is the wounds of the past.
Yeah.
But I love acronyms, and I call it the wow factor. If you can just be in wonderment in observing those wounds, and being able to say that you're a warrior who have overcome those wounds, another wow, right? It is absolutely a catalyst for you then to, move forward and not stay there. And when we're sitting in the future, the fear of the future, it's a doubt, fearful state to be in. And it is difficult to put it into practice, to say, if your income is going to be, as an example, affected, how do you stay in the present moment of knowing that imminent you're going to have loss? And so again, beliefs and conditioned programming, those all play a role. But I suppose what I'm hearing you say is witness it, validate it for whatever is coming up in those moments.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, when I have the feelings come up, and one thing that I was told by my therapist was that trauma is a part of me, and it's okay to embrace that. Like she said, it's as real as like the nose on my face, and she said it's okay to, like she said, you're going to have things pop up. I mean, that's just going to be a given, but it's the choice of, am I going to stay in it and try to just focus so much on why this happened, and then be like, okay, yes, this happened, it sucks, but there's so much more out there for me to experience, even with what happened to me.
Yes, yes. And I don't know if you find that in the moments of the pauses, it's frightening because now you have to actually face it head on. But because the trauma or the wounds and the conditioned beliefs starts to have a certain narrative, we almost like to, add more weight to it and add more, as I say, if the season's on repeat, you need to make it steamier, more hot, more drama that you add to it. And then we simply find ourselves in an illusionary state of what is actually real in this moment. Because as you say, the brain is designed to be in that fight flight. We're searching for the saber-toothed tiger that's on our heels. We're searching for that negativity and the drama and detail and the problems. But when we can acknowledge it and know where we are actually self-sabotaging ourselves and connect to the thriving region of our brain, which can't live simultaneously with fear and doubt and insecurity, or that inner protagonist will never win when you're leading with empathy and compassion for yourself. Right. And you are being curious to discover what's coming up for you and why it's coming up. And I love that you say meditation. I also find it helps me fall asleep because the monkey mind is prevalent at night when we want to go sleep. Right. For those that don't know the monkey mind, it's those thoughts that are jumping from one thought branch to the next, and you just cannot simply switch off.
Yeah.
And then what do? We reach for our phones and doom scroll simply because it's a vice to soothe, and it's like a balm we're putting on. So in the last 13 minutes, almost 12 minutes that we have remaining, what would you say has been, some of your biggest gems and lessons that you have gained through these experiences? And what would you then encourage, as you say, a mindset shift? But what are those practical practices or rituals or whatever they need to be labeled, or constructs or forms? I don't like labels, constructs and forms, but what are those practices that helped you and even the people that you supported in the editing process of their books? Because that's another difficult thing when you're writing a book. Your inner protagonist is running rampant in that stage. Please share with us some gems.
One thing that I have really told myself and then encourage other people is, a lot of times we're searching for validation from outside of ourselves, and that could be with whoever it is, or it could even be validation from something that we're doing. But I like to say that, I am my own X marks the spot, and people are their own X marks the spot. I mean, you have your own inner treasures within you, and you have to validate yourself and blessing yourself along the way for what you are doing and what you've accomplished and the things. So just constantly, and it's not always looked at as a good thing, but I mean, we should be validating ourselves, because we're not always going to get it from the outside world. I mean, it's unfortunately, it's not a very positive place to get validation. So I spend time every day, like, doing my devotional time, my prayer time, and I will do that on my own X marks the spot. So I like to encourage people to say that to themselves and, realize that you do have those inner treasures within you that are waiting to come out. And whether it's a creative activity or a new goal that you want to do, I mean, go out and do them. And also too, I want to encourage people to have fun activities. So often life gets so serious and we get caught up in the milieu of just constantly like having to manage this and that, running households, and, people have kids and all kinds of different things that are going on. And it's like we forget that we were children once, and it's okay to have fun. And, especially as adults, we need to have fun and whatever. And there's so many things that are out there that can be explored. I know libraries are something I always encourage people to look at. My library system has tons of activities and family-friendly ones, concerts, lectures, crafts. They have writing groups. I mean, there's pretty much an activity for everybody, but scheduling time to have fun. It's very, very important. And that goes with that inner tour guide. I mean, finding activities that really will help you get to that stage within you where you're like, hey, I want to do this and I'm okay with that. And then another nugget I want to share, and I've touched on it, is, letting go of how life should be. And if you're open to allowing the how and allowing the, life that you thought that you were going to have, like, let life happen as it's meant to flow. Like, I'm all about flow. And I think about when, if you're watering a garden, if something is on top of that hose, the water is not going to flow through, and it's being blocked. And a lot of times, we're constantly, blocking ourselves, or we're letting other people block what is meant to flow. We're the only ones that know ourselves the best. And I'm very big on, if there's something that you want to do, and I've had to do this for myself, either keep it to yourself and work on it, or maybe just share it with a couple of maybe trusted people. But I found that there's no bigger dream and goal killer than sharing and getting opinions from people that maybe never experienced what you went through, or maybe don't understand it. And then people that doubt comes in, and then people question, like, well, maybe I'm not good enough to do this, or maybe I shouldn't. So, but when deep down you are good enough, more than enough to do it. So I would just say, like, again, going deep within, having time for solitude, and realizing you've got those inner treasures, and just, again, being open to what's out there. There's so much out there to be experienced, having fun, going out there and exploring the world. I mean, these are all things that have helped me, and I encourage people to do them for themselves.
Suzanne, I love that, the inner tour guide, and the fact that you talked about validation. It's interestingly enough, I host another segment called the Entrepreneur Mindset. And this week was about entrepreneurs seeking validation outside of themselves for their business, which is incongruent to why they start their business and to the purpose and impact that they want to leave. So the same applies here, whether you're not an entrepreneur and you an individual, you are the boss of your own life. You are that inner tour guide. You are the hero of your own life. And that external validation is short-lived. Yes. And I don't know if you're familiar with the journey work. Have you ever heard of journey work, Brandon Bays?
Yes.
Yeah. And so my dear peer therapist friend who we run retreats with, I did a journey process with her this week. And it was interesting that what is imminent in my future that's causing the fear and the doubts and the frustration and whatever I'm going through at this moment, which I said I'm embracing, when I really got to the core of that, it had actually nothing to do with what's in the present moment. And it wasn't only about the fear of the future. What I discovered in my process was that I was still attached, holding on to the things that never validated me, maybe as a young girl, or where I never felt safe or protected as a young girl. So, why I'm sharing this is because when you have that, I love that X marks the spot. When you
Yes.
discover that marks the spot within yourself, you
Hmm.
realize that no person, no experience, event, none of that actually is going to validate you or define you in any shape or form. That in actual fact, that it's just asking you to reclaim and come back to sovereignty within you. The X marks the spot. It's the
Yes.
same thing. That's exactly it. So, how do people reconnect with that part of themselves when they don't know even the last bit of how to do that, when they're feeling inadequate or they're feeling like an imposter in their lives and they're wearing all of these superficial masks to fit the mold, to fit within the societal norms or whatever those constructs are? What are some of those, in closing, um, tips and advice that you could say, unveil, let go of the mask, reconnect with your essence? What would you say?
I think it goes back to remembering times where you felt really good about something that you did or something that made you feel good about yourself. And even if you have to go back into earlier years and everything, when I'm going through a crisis, I have to remind myself, okay, what are some other crises or traumatic situations that I've successfully navigated and had victory with. So it's going back into, okay, I got through this, I can go through this, and thinking back to if there's a goal that I want to pursue, I look back on, okay, there was a time when I did this or when I was able to accomplish that. So it's just constantly reminding yourself of those times where you just knew that you had those victories within you. It's always going back to that victory mindset. And it's not easy. And I would suggest spending time by yourself and with no distractions and just really spending time. And for me, like, I do a lot of praying and, again, meditation, even just listening, putting on some calming music, either with your phone or sometimes the TV has some good meditation type channels and stuff where you just have calming music and just sitting there reflecting on the good times and the times that you felt like, wow, yeah, I knew I could do this. And it's amazing, like, how, it's like a memorial stone, as they call it, but in a good way. It's like, yeah, I remember this and I remember that and I remember that. So
Yes.
again, just taking that solitude time and really just diving deep into yourself and remembering the good. And it's not always easy, but it does get better with time.
Love, love, love that. I want you to stay on. We're going to just conclude, but I normally stay on for a short debrief. So, for those that dialed in, yes, this is a story about finding those victories. And I almost feel it's a retrospective journey back. Not that you're going to stay in the past, because we're not asking you to go back to the wounds of the past. We're asking you to go and reflect on where you were an overcomer, where
Yeah.
you had radical resilience and you thrived each time, no matter what dark obstacles or roadblocks you faced along the way. Because those are the experiences, those are the very experiences that have shaped who you are and who you'll continue to be and how you'll continue to serve with your story. So reconnect to the parts that bring you joy, that gives you grace, and that you can move forward with gratitude for each
Yes.
and every experience from a place of equanimity and non-attachment, and knowing that everything we face is impermanent and just a catalyst for us to reconnect and reclaim parts of ourselves that may have been lost along the way. So, on that note, I want to say thank you, Suzanne. This has been deeply enriching and enlightening. And really just energized me again and reminded me to reclaim the victories and stay with that victory moments so that it can help me move forward into the future state as well. For those that have been here on Instagram, Samicha and Au Natural, you joined a bit late, but do watch the replay. These beautiful nuggets from Suzanne, and her story is so inspiring. Ronald, thank you for all your comments, and we will
Yes.
see you again same time next week. So I'm going to leave the last word to you, Suzanne. What would you like to say to conclude?
I just want to thank everyone, and I just want to just say I am so grateful to be here today. And I mean, any of those challenges that I've been through, I mean, could have ended in a different way, but I am so grateful to be able to be here on, on these podcasts and be able to share and give hope to people. And I just want to say, again, your own X marks the spot. Keep those treasures with, out there and help inspire people. And I'm inspired every day by people's stories of overcoming and victory and everything. So I am just so grateful for all of you and people who have overcome and the way that you help others too. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And on that note, I'm going to end the live. Don't forget to stay with me, Suzanne.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll end it on both